荧幕前的观众朋友，大家午安，大家好，我是外贸协会的陈婉如，欢迎来到新冠市场学的系列线上研讨会。因为新冠疫情造成全球车市陷入萧条，现在的台湾汽配产业真是像极了爱情。今天的研讨会主题就是因应全球时局，将探讨台湾汽配产业如何在全球的汽车市场布局商机。那在活动开始前呢，欢迎大家能够帮我们分享以及按赞，还有呢要订阅 YouTube 频道哦。再来要开启我们的小铃铛，让冒险的影片不漏接。那同时呢，也不要忘了帮我们扫 QR code 填写相关的问卷。由于2020年全球受到疫情的影响，汽车业更是面临了前所未有的挑战。那本次呢，十分荣幸邀请到美国汽车研究中心研究部主任 Bernard Swiecki， 欧洲最大汽配的零售商 cars 商务部主任Cybulski，以及中东地区前三大 AM 零配件市场进口商 Landmark International 的 CEO Rahul Ramadas， 三位重量级的讲师来为大家分享他们怎么样看待目前全球以及欧美、亚非之间的情况以及商机。那首先呢，让我们欢迎美国汽车研究中心研究部主任 Mr. Bernard Swiecki 为我们介绍美国汽配市场商机。Let's welcome Mr. Swiecki.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you today. My name is Bernard Swiecki, and I'm one of the directors at the Center for Automotive Research. Next slide, please. The Center for Automotive Research, or CAR, is a not-for-profit organization focused on the automotive industry. And I would recommend for you to visit our website, where you can find free reports to download and webinars that we've recorded that are available to the public to listen to at any time. Next slide, please. I've prepared a short summary of the current state of the industry in the United States, and that'll take us into some of the more finer import-oriented subject matter later in this presentation. Next slide, please. I'd like to start by sharing some news about vehicle sales in the United States. This chart gives us monthly sales performance for the last 4 years. And of course, that light green line represents 2020. We could see that the COVID impact started happening in the middle of March. And then the entire month of April was impacted by both factory and economic shutdowns around the country. We saw a rebound, a return to closer to normal levels in May. However, it's important to note that this effect kind of petered out in June. June, in fact, was, I think, a little bit disappointing, given that a lot of people expected that we would be making a very quick recovery to normal sales levels. Next slide, please. On an automaker by automaker basis, I'd like to just show you the results of the big 7, as we call them. And these companies typically have about 85% of the United States market. And as you'll see, total sales so far this year are down about 23.5%, which is almost 2 million units fewer sold this year than at the same time last year. Most of the automakers have a performance that's very similar to this average number. Of the big 7, there are 2 that stand out. One, Hyundai Kia, they've only lost 16% compared to last year. However, it's important to note that they'd had a few years of shaky sales. So we're comparing this to a poor performance in 2019. Likewise, Nissan Mitsubishi down nearly 40% compared to this time last year. It's important to note that this is a company that was already experiencing problems before the COVID crisis began. In fact, in the United States, in the holiday period between Christmas and New Year's, already then we saw Nissan having the salaried and manufacturing workforce taking unpaid furlough days off. So this crisis has only worsened and deepened the problems at Nissan Mitsubishi. Next slide, please. The total performance of these companies here is seen as their market share. And so far this year, General Motors has 17% of the market. Ford in second, and Toyota is close behind in third. I think it's important to note that there are months and there are years when Toyota actually outsells Ford and becomes the second highest volume automaker in America. And I think, one thing that Taiwanese suppliers can think about is, do we already sell to these companies in other markets of the world? Because if you do, then there's a chance that that would serve as an entrance into the US market and US sales and production. And you can see the different scale of these companies here in the US market. Next slide, please. The United States is also very different from most world markets in the sense of which segments, what kind of cars, what kind of trucks the American consumer is buying. So I really wanted to make that an important part of this presentation today. And this slide gives us that. So is down 23.5%, but pickup trucks and some of the smaller utility vehicles are actually doing well and are actually gaining market share. They're still down compared to this time last year, but they're not down as much as the whole market. So therefore, they have a larger share of the market. And what we've seen is a continuation of prior trends where the American market moves away from sedans and cars and moves towards trucks and utility vehicles. And this is seen in terms of the better than average performance that pickup trucks and CUVs and SUVs have had. It's also seen at the very bottom of this slide, where you'll see that the largest declining segments in America are small cars and large cars. Those are the segments that are actually shrinking instead of growing. And next slide, please. So now we see what happens. When we put all this together, how much of the market does each one of these segments hold? And the largest segment right now is that mid-size CUV crossover utility vehicle segment, but pickup trucks are second. It's important to note that this is a little bit of a difference from most of the rest of the world. The United States definitely is much more truck and large vehicle focused than most global markets. Next slide. I'd also like to talk a little bit about what we've seen in investments. And this data is coming from CAR's own investment database. And we know now that we've started a recession in 2020, that 2019 was the end of a period, an era in the automotive industry in North America. So this slide gives us the total investment we've seen by the automakers, so just the car companies and not the suppliers. So during that time, more than 3/4 or 77% of the entire North American investment went into the United States, 17% to Mexico, and only 6% to Canada. Canada, unfortunately, is continuing to struggle in attracting automotive investment. We at CAR are working with the Canadian government and also with the provincial government of the province of Ontario to help them with some of their automotive strategies to attract more investment into Canada. Within the United States, the Great Lakes region, which is Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, those states that are the traditional heart of the industry, received $77 billion of investment during this time, or almost half of what went in to the entire continent. So that very much continues to be the heart of the industry here in North America. In the meantime, Mexico got about $25 billion, which is true, by the way. I know Mexico gets a lot of attention for the investment that's moving there, but that tends to be the new plants. And in the industry, most of the money goes into expanding or updating existing plants. So when we look at the total, everything put together, just the state of Michigan alone received more investment during this time than the entire country of Mexico. Next slide, please. All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about how this is going to be changing in the future. So I've got the latest forecasts from CAR for both vehicle sales and production. Next, please. Starting with just vehicle sales in the United States, this forecast takes us through 2027. In the United States, we set an all-time record at 17.5 million units in 2016. And you can tell how far below that will dip in 2020, about 4 million fewer vehicles sold this year than we had in 2016. However, we do expect a rapid recovery, selling nearly 3 million more vehicles in 2021 than we will in 2020. And one thing that I'd like to point out is if we go out to the 2024-25 period, we set all new records. So we come back and recover what we lost, and we also build on that and sell more vehicles than ever in the history of the United States. And next slide, please. And switching to production, let's keep that in mind, what we just saw with vehicle sales. And we start with just United States production, and we'll talk about North American production second. For the United States, a similar pattern that we set a record in 2016, have a drastic reduction in 2020, and then make a rapid recovery after that. But please note, not like sales, production never returns to a new record in the United States. Next slide, please. And the reason why production doesn't return to a new record in the United States is this. You see it here on the North American production forecast, and you see that it does. In 2025, we do expect to set a new all-time continental production record, and the reason for that is the full volume ramp-up of the new assembly plants in Mexico. So you can see the new plants in Mexico are swaying the entire continental picture that we're seeing. And obviously the growth is not coming in Canada. Mexico is really where the new plants have gone. Next slide, please. Okay, switching a little bit about COVID-19 at this point, what we're seeing and what we're expecting next. Next slide, please. Our work has really kind of followed the progression of the pandemic in its severity and impacts. And so we at CAR started, around February in terms of just modeling the impact of the disruptions that we were seeing of Chinese production. And then slowly, as the disease spread around the world, we started looking at just the production hits in the United States. Of course, that led to demand crashes and economic hardships that reduced the need for vehicle production because we're not selling as many vehicles in a poor economy. And therefore, there are new related plant shutdowns that are caused not just by the disease and the pandemic, but by the fact that we don't need to produce vehicles if consumers are not buying them. Next slide, please. So we have a problem in the automotive industry that really impacts suppliers the most, and that is the fact that there's a lag of maybe a month and a half to 2 months from when a supplier supplies a good to an automaker and when they get paid. And so when we think about the fact that the industry stopped producing in March, it is really May, June, July that is the critical period when the suppliers have not been receiving payments from the automakers, but they need to be paying for materials and inputs in order to begin producing again. And so right now in July, we believe this is the height of that sensitive period when the supply base really doesn't have enough cash. And we're seeing a lot of steps that the automakers are taking to help support them financially to get through this cash crunch during the summer period when we're in this transitional mode. Next slide, please. So we are monitoring the situation as it goes, but we've never really had a crisis quite like this. Even in 2009, when things really got serious, we never had a full-on stoppage of production the way that we did now. And so things are really changing. It's a very different environment in that sense. So we are seeing all these steps that companies are taking to improve their liquidity and their position. And so far, so good. You know, we've had a whole lot of disruptions and problems, but overall, I think the industry is doing a fairly good job of moving past these issues that we lay out here on this slide. Next, please. We have a replacement for what used to be NAFTA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It is the new way that trade takes place on the continent of North America, and the automotive industry really is the focus of much of the changes between NAFTA and the USMCA. So I did want to provide a little bit of information about that in the time that I have. Next slide, please. The USMCA, or the new NAFTA, went into effect on July 1st. So it is now officially the way that trade in North America happens. It is more stringent than NAFTA was in terms of requiring higher North American content levels in order for a vehicle to be sellable as a North American built vehicle and to be transferred between Canada, the United States, and Mexico without paying a tariff. It's important to note that this only matters if the vehicle moves between borders. If it's sold in the same country where it was built, it's not a factor. It's also important to note that let's say a vehicle doesn't qualify for USMCA. That vehicle then is subject to a 2.5% tariff. So that is what we're really comparing, is the 2.5% tariff that would be paid if the vehicle were not compliant with what it costs to make it compliant with the new USMCA. Next slide. For Taiwanese suppliers, as they consider whether they should be approaching the North American market, I think this is a very important one. Of the Detroit 3 automakers, 81% of the vehicles that they build in the United States stay right here in the United States. So I think, and you see the different numbers there for Japanese and Korean companies, European, and the totals. And you'll see that those numbers are much lower in Canada and Mexico. And so to me, it all comes down to a question of one, will the vehicle to which you're hoping to supply as a Taiwanese supplier be built in the United States, Canada, or Mexico, because the USMCA has different importance depending on that? And two, is that vehicle just sold, built in the United States, sold in the United States, or does it change borders? Because you'll see that the automaker to whom you're supplying will have very different content requirements based on that fact. And so to me, that is the first thing that a Taiwanese supplier should be looking at when considering this option. Next, please. Next slide. There it is. Now, I mentioned earlier that if we don't qualify for USMCA, then that particular vehicle is subject to a 2.5% most favored nation status tariff. And what we see here is when it comes to vehicle parts, already about 12% of the trade between Canada never did qualify for NAFTA, and with Mexico, nearly 20% of that parts trade did not qualify for NAFTA. So we are seeing quite a bit of trade happening that is either non-compliant, or it maybe is compliant, but it's just too expensive or too complex to demonstrate compliance. And so we just pay the 2.5% tariff and not worry about NAFTA, or now in this case, NAFTA being gone, not worry about USMCA, because again, the penalty for non-compliance is just that 2.5%. And when considering whether a Taiwanese supplier should be worried about USMCA compliance, that's another question. One will be all those customer demands that I mentioned earlier. Another one will be, what will it cost to become compliant? If the cost is more than 2.5%, you're better off just paying the tariff and not worrying about the compliance. Next, please. I'd like to wrap up with some final thoughts and conclusions. Next, please. Okay, we talked a lot about what's happening in 2020, but I think it's important to note that it's a unique year. What we've seen so far is really not reflective of what I think we can expect going out into the future. And so I think there are lessons to be learned from that, and we'll get to those in the end. But I think the uncertainty and the volatility will slowly start leaving both the overall economy and particularly the automotive industry as well. We right now in the United States are in the middle of an election year, and the trade environment we do expect to be continuing to be volatile, and much will depend on who the next president is. If Donald Trump retains the presidency, we expect similar trade tactics, more of an America alone, worrying about its trade battles. If Joe Biden should win, we would expect him to take a more multilateral approach and try to partner with other countries in doing joint efforts when it comes to trade adjustments, particularly to China. Now, recommendations in terms of what the automakers, what the customer to a potential Taiwanese supplier would value. First of all, cost, always a factor, especially now when the automakers are quite cash strapped. It never is not important, but I think it's even more important during this environment. Quality, always an issue, especially for things coming in from overseas, because you get that complexity of the supply chain when it comes to making corrections, and it just takes longer. For the vehicles that it matters, for the vehicles that do cross those North American borders, content assistance to help that automaker be compliant with USMCA. If a supplier can make a positive contribution there, I think they've got a better chance of winning some business. And then finally, supply chain visibility and durability. Every time we have one of these crises, if you go back to the tsunamis in Japan many years ago, to other crises that we've had, and now a global pandemic, we see the importance of a transparent, well understood automotive supply chain, knowing exactly which components are coming from where, and putting in enough inventory, enough replaceability and duplicability to make that supply chain durable when a crisis like this hits. And demonstrating that kind of capability, I think, will really help a Taiwanese supplier be successful in America. Next slide, please. So that is the end of my presentation. I would like to again say thank you very much for including me in this conference, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Swiecki， 真的是非常的精彩，也感谢他的宝贵分享的经验。那我们疫后市场学的系列线上研讨会呢，从今天开始，每周四下午3点都会准时开播。那在8月份呢，我们也将聚焦在新创、再生能源以及机械产业来进行剖析。那欢迎大家都能够准时上线收看。那另外呢，观众若对于讲者有想提问的问题，都可以在影片的下方连结填上您的问题，我们都可以收得到。那我们也会呢，请我们的专家为您一一解答。那接下来呢，让我们欢迎欧洲的 Cars 商务部主任 Cybulski 为我们介绍欧洲汽配市场商机。Let's welcome Mr. Cybulski.
Hello, good morning. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Taitra, for inviting me for this presentation. My name is Mieszko Cybulski, and I'm working for Cars company from Poland. I'm commercial director, and I'm mainly responsible for body parts business in Cars. Today, I would like to touch this 4 topics. So, automotive spare part business in Poland, how looks COVID situation after COVID situation, something about e-commerce in the automotive business in Poland, and last topic is how to upgrade business with auto parts producer in Taiwan. So maybe on the beginning, I will say a couple of words about my company. So Intercars is a capital group which was founded in Poland. We are listed on the stock exchange right now, and our main business is sales of car spare parts, but not only cars, also trucks, agriculture, light commercial vehicles, motorcycles. We also have a daughter company which is responsible for logistics, but also we have a company named Lauber, which is Swiss-Serbish company. Also, there is inside our group Weber, which is manufacturer of trolleys for trucks. So for this moment, we are number one as a spare part distributor in Central East Europe, but also second company in Europe. Also, we are on the first place in truck business in Central East Europe. This is areas which my company is touching for this moment. As I said, our main business is car parts, truck parts, but also crash parts, accessories, batteries, marine. Also, it's a new one in our company. So, as I said, we are a leader in Central East Europe. We are working for this moment in 17 countries, mostly in Central East Europe area, but also we are doing export around the world. We have around 1,000 suppliers and 350,000 SKUs, which is available for every single customer. And we have regular customers around 100,000. So and 560 branches around Europe. So let's go to these topics which I presented on the beginning. So automotive spare part business in Poland. Generally, on the beginning, I can say that this is a really big part of business for Poland. So we have I split it for 3 areas. So first of all, it's a part manufacturer. So we are very, very strong as a country in parts manufacturing. Mostly because there is a couple of factories of cars. Unfortunately, we don't have our Polish big Polish car manufacturer factory, but we have factories of Fiat, factories of Volkswagen, factories of Opel also. And it's always like this when around the factories of new cars, also there is a plenty factories of parts. So the production of the parts is around 21 billion euro, and more than half of these parts are going for exports. These parts manufacturers are giving 154,000 workplaces, and it is around 1,100 manufacturers and producers of parts and components. The second thing is parts distributors. So like my company, Intercars, value of domestic parts, of domestic sales and export is 5.6 billion euro, and also it gives around 32,000 workplaces, 700,000 square meters of warehouse area, and inside the business it's around 50 companies and more than 1,000 wholesale outlets. If you go to the third part, it means workshops. This is business. Value of this business is 7.4 billion euro, and it gives 145 workplaces. And in Poland, we can say that it's around 24,000 workshops. Some of them are inside the work in networks, and there is around 30 networks. So it shows us that this business is really big in Poland. So altogether, we can say that it's 330,000 workplaces created by automotive industry, and it gives around 8% of Polish GDP. So it's a huge numbers. This value is 35 billion euro altogether, and we are for this moment on the ninth place as an exporter of auto parts in the world. If we go inside the details, how looks market? So for this moment, car park in Poland is around 23 million passenger cars. But there is something which I need to say. This 23 million passenger cars, this number is coming from official statistic. So from Eurostat, for example, and also from ACEA. Unfortunately, these numbers are coming from official database, which is not so good, because there is, in Poland, you don't need, as a car owner, you don't need to unregister your car when you take it, for example, for the scrapyard. So unofficial number of cars is around 80 million. I need to say this because it has some influence or some other data which I show you a little later. But if we see this picture, so average age of the car is almost 14 years old. What does it mean for example, for auto parts distributors and producers? It means that aftermarket is really strong in this part of Europe, because mainly cars are more than 10 years. So it means that if they want to make any repairs, they go to independent workshops, independent aftermarket, not to OE dealers. Of course, because of cost, the repairs in independent aftermarket is much cheaper, and this part of business looks really strong. Just as a confirmation that aftermarket is really strong. Also, we can I can show you this number of new cars and second-hand parts registered in 2019. So if you see the numbers, there is 600,000 new cars which was registered in 2019, but more than 1 million was import of second-hand cars to Poland, which means that new registered cars is 1.6 million cars last year, but more than 60% of them was cars imported from Western Europe, old cars imported from Western Europe. And what more, maybe one additional information, if we take new cars, mostly because more than 60% of these cars were bought by companies. Only 29% was bought by individual customers. So this is a sales of new cars. So if we talk about this year, it's a part of maybe next point about coronavirus, but after 6 months, the sales of new cars was minus 35%. Also, import of second-hand cars decreased a lot. But here I would like to show you how looks the car park of new cars. So what is the current situation? So it looks that the most popular are small family cars, but also SUV. So Poland, I can say that it's inside a trend which is around the world, that SUV are more and more popular, and these cars start to be a first choice for somebody who is looking for new car. Also, I don't have a picture of this, but petrol engines are more and more popular. Of course, hybrid and electric cars, they are more popular than last year and previous year, but the number of these cars are not so huge in Poland, on the much lower level than in other Western, more wealthy country in Europe. Also, this is a confirmation of how it looks if we are talking about average age of the car. So again, it's a confirmation that it's 13.9 when the average inside European Union is 10.8. So you see the difference between Western and Eastern Europe. So for example, first place is for Luxembourg, where the average age is around 6 years. On the second side, we have Eastern countries like Poland, 14, but also country like Croatia, which is 14, Estonia, which is almost 16, Lithuania, which is almost 17 years old. So this is one more time confirmation why aftermarket in this part of Europe is so strong, and I think that it will be strong also in near future. That's why company like Intercars, independent distributors, see the, let's say, bright future for the business. And also there is another confirmation why this business will be developed in the near future. I'm sorry, but again, this is a statistic from Eurostat, which takes that in consideration that there is a 23 million cars in Poland, and it shows that it's 617 cars per 1,000 inhabitants, but the real number is around 480 cars, which I show on the left. But it looks again that it's below the average. And again, I would like to show you that I'm sorry, that in the countries which are inside the Central East Europe, like Croatia, when there is only around 400 cars per 1,000 people, but also country like Hungary, where it's less than 400, Latvia 329, Lithuania 500. But generally, this is again some kind of confirmation that we are trying to have the same level of cars as it is in Western Europe. And people are more and more wealthy, they have more and more money, so it means that they will buy more cars, which means that the market potential is again is growing. So I think that in next couple of years we can reach the average which is in European Union, which for this moment it's 531 cars. So there will be more cars on the market in next years. Also here, I will maybe little back to this information which I give you a couple of slides before, that around 1 million cars are coming as a second-hand cars to Central East Europe, to Poland, sorry, but also to other countries in Central East Europe. This is the same process. And what is important, maybe from, let's say, Taiwanese manufacturer point of view, it's that some of these cars, part of these cars are coming after crashes, small crashes, big crashes, but generally they are not 100% good. And before the second-hand cars dealers will sell this car, they need to be repaired, which means that we need body parts. And this body parts business, aftermarket body parts business, is very, very strong in Taiwan. And I can risk even that Taiwan probably is a #1 country in this kind of parts for this moment. So it means that this aftermarket body parts business in Central East Europe looks very good. And until we will have this kind of situation that people will use mostly second-hand cars, this business will look okay, in my opinion. So it's also the space. Still, there is a space, in my opinion, for growth in this business, especially in connection with Taiwanese companies. There is another slide about maybe more European situation. So estimation about market size in Europe, independent aftermarket is 92 billion euro. This number comes from report which is saying that generally business aftermarket business is 150 billion euro, but 60% of this is independence. The rest is distributed by OE dealers. And if we take this number, the potential of Central East Europe is around 23 billion euro. But what I also try to take a look on the situation which we have in Europe, that as you can see, this is the top top 8 players in sales of independent aftermarket parts in Europe. But as you can see, the share of these top players is only 9%, which give us a conclusion that aftermarket business, I mean players, this is very fragmented market. So for sure, in near couple of years, the situation about players on the market can change. There will be some consolidation for sure. I think that situation with coronavirus will even speed up the process of consolidation. And so we can say that in couple of years the market situation can really change. I think that the big players will stay on the market and will be even stronger, but probably small players or some local players can be sold or can even collapse. And 5.6 billion euro, it's an estimated market size in Poland. So there is couple more words about this Central East Europe market characteristic, because this is a characteristic of Polish market, but also other Central East Europe country. So generally, we are growing faster than Western Europe, and we can say this about automotive business, but generally our GDP is growing faster than Western European countries. From other side, growing and aging fleet of motor vehicles, it's something would help us in independent aftermarket business. As I said, it's a fragmented market, and also we can say that this is, in my opinion, very important for our business. So plenty of car user, which in the past were buying parts for do it yourself. Right now, more and more people are using do it for me. So they are using workshops. So the second point today is how COVID influence on business and after COVID situation. I would like to touch some topics. First of all, I found some very interesting website where you could find it is data from mobile phones. I guess it's on the Apple website, but it showed how looks the mobility of the people from beginning of the year. So it looks this first slide is about Italy, Germany, United States, and UK. So you can see in maybe different time, but more or less the same time, because it was March, April. So we see that mobility of people really decreased to compare with average from March to May. But it looks from other side that from June and right now we have 13th of July, it went up. So people were start to move. Here we have a situation which we have in Poland, so more or less the same. And in the worst days, the mobility of people was around minus 80% to compare with average. Right now, we have a summer season. People start to move again, so it's more than average. For sure, we can see, and also I can say that this is some positive for our business, that people more and more are using their private cars and try to not to use public transport like buses, like underground, for example, in the city where it is. So this is also some kind of positive for us for the future, which can cover, I can say, this what we lost during a couple of last months. So this is Roland Berger analyzes about potential situation in 2020 and 2021. So I think that this scenario for this year, so it means that -5 to -10%. It can be like this, that some of companies will finish on the minus or around zero. But also I think that next year will be positive, back to the normal situation, which means that around between 0 to 5% growth we can have in independent aftermarket. It seems that this situation can be much better than, for example, in United States. Still, for this moment, if we compare Europe to United States, there is much more people with virus and new cases in United States than in Europe. Here we have situation which we have in Intercars, just to show you, to compare with this slide before. So we can see that the worst months for us was March and April. But in June, we back to the growth and we had a positive result. I think that from our forecast, our prediction, we should finish around zero this year. But this is total sales, and I show you on the beginning that we are some kind of one-stop shop for the customers. So we have plenty of parts, and we are touching spare parts, tires, oils, many businesses, trucks. So I just would like to show you how looks this in several parts of our business, because situation is different. So this is a table for the mechanical parts in passenger cars. So you can see that it's like in the trend, let's say. So in March, when our government blocked the country, let's say, froze the country, we have -15. But the lockdown was in the middle of March. So first 2 weeks of March was positive, but the second weeks was negative. So April was the worst month, but then May was little better, and June was on plus. In commercial cars, this situation look different, because in June maybe it's not positive, but it's neutral, because the result was the same. Sorry, in the bottom, this is the table which I showed you one slide before. So it's total sales of Intercars group, just to comparison. But you can see that little different it looks in oil, for example. So oil didn't go so deeply. It's 21, 22 maybe in the sorry, it was deeply in April, but it was recovered a little faster than spare parts. In body parts business, generally is more or less like in spare parts. But what is interesting, the tire business and the batteries business look better than mechanical parts, and I can say that it influence on the total result of Inter Cars Group. So as I'm always saying, it's good to have many businesses, as we say, many legs, which you are stand on. So, for example, tire business recovered very fast, and in May it was plus 15. But the situation which we have in Central East Europe, so we are changing tires from winter to summer tires, and usually we are doing this in March, in the end of March, in beginning of April. So what happened? People probably just moved their decision from April to May, but from other side, almost nobody decide, I think, not to do it at all. Because, for example, in mechanical parts, especially when you are changing oil filter and this kind of service parts, probably some of people decide not to do it at all, for example, and to do it much later. With tires, to be honest, you cannot do it because you can destroy your winter tire very fast during the summer season, so it's necessary to do it. Even better is the situation in batteries, which is also very interesting, because it looks that, as you can see, we didn't have a minus in this business at all. Why? Because many of people stay at home. It means that cars also stay at home, and many of these cars was not in use couple even of weeks, which means that batteries died. And this business, because of that, look very good. And usually it's like that after winter season, the batteries are poor. The condition of battery is poor. And then if they even stay at home without moving, the battery's condition was even worse. That's why the result is quite positive. And this is some kind of repair which you need to do it immediately. So you cannot postpone this kind of repair because you will not move your car. The worst situation, I can say, that we have in garage equipment. And sorry, the worst situation is in a garage equipment, but it's a consequence of maybe this slide, which I want to show you right now. So it means that workshops, of course, every single business would like to save some money during these poor days, and this is what kind of decision they made. 55% of workshops decide not to invest to workshop tools during this time. And this is this slide which I showed you before, that we lost some turnover in garage equipment is because of this decision. Also, they decide to make some savings or of training, and also reduction of scope of services. Also, as you can see, almost 82% of workshop decides to grow their prices. And I think that it is not temporary situation, but these prices will stay as a standard prices during, let's call it, normal times. But the reaction of workshops was very quick for COVID, because 85% immediately took steps to protect employees and customers. So I mean, fluids, gloves, and this kind of things. And around 95% of workshop reduced the hours of service to reduce cost. And it looks that I think almost all of the workshops survived this poor time. We didn't hear any information that some of them collapsed or something bad happened. And this slide is about consequences of COVID. In my opinion, it is a little faster growth in e-commerce, so much better than before. Before, of course, generally e-commerce is growing, but during this COVID days, it was growing faster. But I think that also one of the consequences will be a digitalization of companies. They will speed up also all of this process, which makes more advanced with electronics computers. This is what I also say. Less people will use public transport, which again it's quite positive for us because they will use probably in their private cars. So the cars will need to have services. Also, another consequences is many people stay at home and start to work in home office, and it means that for the future, I think that some companies will not afraid to send people to work from home because until coronavirus, many companies didn't want to decide because they were afraid if they will work correctly or not. And I think that many companies see that this home office style is working. So even my company, the conclusion is that we could do it. What does it mean? It can save costs because number of employee is growing generally. And if you have more employees, you need to have also more office space. And this is for sure cost. And one of the point which is from my point of view quite interesting because this situation, this emergency situation shows that you need to be prepared as a company to do this kind of strange things like how to protect because of this coronavirus. And what is interesting, it's for example, our company has this kind of bad situation around 3 years. It was 2017, as I remember. We were attacked by Pietia, it is an electronic virus. And at the time, our company stopped at all for 2 days. So all of the system were infected. And at the time, we learned how to work with this crisis situation. So we had a crisis staff, which when coronavirus appeared, this crisis staff start to work immediately. They have some they made some very fast decision, which help us how to live with in this poor time. It helps company to do it everything faster and correct because there is no losing time for discussion. Then everybody knows what is his or her responsibility in the company and do things very fast. So my advice is to, especially for bigger company, to have this kind of crisis staff because it helps in this kind of crisis situation. So next point is e-commerce business in Poland, and it's a very wide topic. So for sure, I can only touch some things. So first slide is about numbers of e-shops in Poland, and you can see that number of automotive e-shops is for sure is growing. So last year, more than 6% of e-shops were specialized in automotive. Of course, to compare this this kind of business like house and garden, clothes, for example, is still not enough. But we see that this part of business is growing. When we talk about e-commerce, I think that very important is what kind of products we are offering, and is it possible for end user, for a car owner to do it by their own. I said before that do it yourself is losing with do it for me, but it depends which product group. So especially here with the wipers and bulbs, it looks that mostly it is changed in car by car owner. So also it is very popular in e-commerce business. But on the other side, we can have, for example, clutches or body parts, which of course you can buy via e-commerce, but for sure or almost for sure, end user will not change it by their own because of tools, because of place to do it, and because of knowledge. It's impossible. Only one let's say, strange thing in this comparison is winter and summer tires, so generally tires. So from one side, it is extremely popular in e-commerce business. So car owners are buying tires usually by their own. It can be e-commerce, but it can be also some other places like malls, shopping malls, markets, and some other places. But mostly, still they are changing these tires in the workshop. So because you still need to have some specialized equipment. So the question is, of course, is e-commerce the future for automotive? So as you saw 2 slides before, automotive purchase in Poland is around 6% via internet. Also, it looks that 20 billion US dollar is a transaction B2C in North America and Europe, and automotive via e-commerce will be around 10% of all sales in spare parts business. Also, I found information that the prediction is that in next 15 years, e-commerce in automotive will be around 30%. Of course, there is some other advantage of e-commerce, which is generally the same in automotive, but in all other businesses like clothes, foods, and all of these things. So modern customers want to have possibility to search by their own, to check opinions, to see the picture, to compare these different things between each other. And as I said, the comparison, but also easy price check. So you can sit at home and check all of the prices, choose the best one, choose the best quality for you. So all of these things makes that, yes, probably e-commerce is the future also in automotive. But from other side, are we really sure that it can dominate this automotive business? Still, for correct repair, advice of professional and identity of the part and assembling especially is necessary. So many of our final customer, I mean car user, cannot do it by their own, which is some kind of blocker to buy it. Also, what is very, very important, of course, if you are making some kind of service, some typical service, which you are doing, let's say every year in your car, like oil filter, you can predict that, for example, in July or in some other month, you need to buy these filters. But many of repairs are something what just happened. For example, the failed battery or some other accident which stop your cars. So there is, you cannot plan it. So you cannot buy this part before repair. Something happened to your car and you need to do it immediately. So you are taking this to workshop, and then parts will be need to buy by workshop probably. Also, some kind of blocker is size and shape of products for this moment. The best example is, for example, big body parts or some garage equipment. Not all of the courier company wants to offer service for this kind of part, or maybe even more popular probably will be that, yes, I can offer you, but the price of transport will be very, very big for this kind of parts. So, and usually spare part distributors are offering the free of charge transport. So it makes difference, just makes a difference in price. Also, the last point, in my opinion, which is some kind of blocker, it's a return logistic. So, for example, many parts like batteries, like steering gears, when you have a new part, you need to send back old part, which creates some troubles also for end user. Okay, battery you can take out of the car very easy, but can end user take out steering gears? I don't think so. So in my opinion, traditional business still will be a key, or at least a big part of this automotive spare part business. Of course, I agree that share of e-commerce will grow, but I don't think so that in near couple of years it can be more than half, for example, or key sales channel. The last topic is how to upgrade business with auto parts producer in Taiwan. I was thinking how to touch, to be honest, this topic, and I decided to give you my subjective feeling, because I'm working with companies in Taiwan around 8 years, and I think that I can say that I have experience to work with Taiwanese company. What more, I can also compare it to my experience, which I have in other part of the world, because I'm also responsible for some trading from Europe, from China also, but also from our local Polish market. So my feeling is that generally, if we talk about production and products, usually it's good, because production you have on very good level. There is no trouble with parts. Quality is good, and generally contact is really good with this company. This is what I'm missing, in my opinion, is something what I can call sales area. So if we compare Taiwanese companies to European companies, there is a totally different style. So I can say that Taiwanese sales staff usually it's some kind of invoice creator. They are taking care about logistics, how to sell it, but they are not typical sales people as we see this in Europe, when European companies usually are very aggressive in sales. They are making plenty of analyses. They are asking for many things. Why you are buying this? Why you are not buying this? What is the reason? How looks the market situation? What can we do together to increase this situation which we have right now? What is our potential to do it? How we can support you? And I'm not saying that all of these things should be used by Taiwanese company, but just to they should consider to see how European company is working. To be honest, I have I don't know how to do it for this moment, but I hope that, for example, Taiwanese companies are smart enough, and with help of Taitra, maybe they will find a solution. But this is something what I'm really missing. So I will give you maybe one example which I usually use just to explain my feelings. So I had this kind of situation that we were buying one of the parts. It's a body part, but doesn't matter what. We were buying, and it was some kind of fast mover in the company. Let's call it company A, and company A price was let's say 20. Also, it doesn't matter, but this price was 20, and we are buying quite a lot of pieces of this product. And then we got offer from another company, which, let's say, it was price 18. So we decided to switch this item to this company, which offer us better price. And during a couple of months, even it was a fast mover, there was nobody who asked us why you stop sell this. Sorry, why you stop buy this from us. And after almost a year, finally they found that we are not buying this part and asked us why. So we said, because we got better price from others. And what is your price? We said 18, but our current price is 16. And this was something strange, because we could buy this again from this company, but we didn't know about this price. So nobody analyzed on the side of this company why we are stop buying. Also, nobody informed us that they changed the price. On my question, but I don't know about this change. This company said, but when you order, you will have this new price on invoice. And I said, but I never ordered this kind of part because in my, let's say, comparison file, you are not the best offer. And the conclusion is that there is usually nobody who can analyze this. What more, I was conversate with some companies why it's like this, and many times they say because we don't have tools to analyze this, and many things we need to do manually. So generally, my view of many Taiwanese manufacturers is that they are really focused on manufacturing parts, and they are perfect at it, and they are absolutely specialists. But from other side, they have some, let's call it, missings in sales area. And in my opinion, some kind of investment in this area can really rise up the turnover and business between companies in Europe and Taiwan. Just to understand what is your needs and what is our needs. For sure, it's impossible to do it European way, but some of good practice could be taken from Europe for sure, and I'm sure about this. Okay, thank you very much. It was my last slide, and I hope that you like my presentation. And one more time, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cybulski. 当然啦，为了要抢得市场的先机，我们就需要在地的专家给予我们第一手的资讯。而我们疫后市场学的线上研讨会呢，每周四下午3点都会准时在线上开播。在9月份呢，我们也将探讨电动自行车、防疫商机、5G 应用以及智慧城市等等相关议题。欢迎各位能够准时上线收看。那最后呢，我们邀请到中东地区 Landmark International 的 CEO Rahul Ramadas 来介绍中东的汽配市场商机。Let's welcome Mr. Ramadas.
Hey, good morning to all. My name is Rahul Ramadas, and today I am presenting to you the Taiwan Auto Parts, the trade opportunities in MENA region. So initially, before I start my presentation, I would like to give you a brief introduction of myself. My organization name is Landmark International, and we are one of the leading auto body parts distributors in the whole of GCC region. We are headquartered out of UAE, and we have almost retail outlets throughout UAE and Oman as well. And we have distribution network throughout GCC region, Middle East region, African, and some of the CIS countries as well. That's the network we have, and I work as the general manager in this company. Now, our connection to Taiwan is that we deal with Taiwan auto aftermarket parts, basically, and we deal with almost 25 plus factories of Taiwan. And we deal with a lot of trading companies also in Taiwan. So almost 75% of our imports are with Taiwan, and major auto aftermarket we deal is with Taiwan. Apart from Taiwan, we also deal with some of the Chinese, Malaysian, Thailand auto parts as well. And today my presentation actually is about the trade opportunities that is existing in UAE, not just UAE, the whole of GCC, as well as the Middle East regions and the MENA region also. And I'll be mainly talking about the aftermarket opportunities because aftermarket auto spare parts are a main forte of mine. So I'll be mainly talking about that. I would like to start my presentation mainly with the sales channels that are existing in UAE as well as GCC. By sales channel, I mean the sales opportunities for all the manufacturing countries like Taiwan, China. What are the sales opportunities in UAE? Now, sales opportunities in UAE, you can basically segregate it into one is the local sales channels that is existing in UAE. By local sales channel, I mean the local market, the local consumption that is required in the UAE. And secondary sales channel is a re-export channel that exists in UAE. The items that we export out of UAE. So initially, I would start my presentation with the local market of UAE. How is the local market functioning in UAE? What are the opportunities in the local market of UAE, as well as GCC regions? Now, by local market, I can say most of you who are aware about UAE, It's mostly a really small country compared to its neighbors, actually, Saudi Arabia or Oman or even Iraq or any other countries. It's really a small country compared to all these neighboring countries of Middle East. But it has a fairly huge population, actually, almost close to 10 million population is there, and out of which population, 90% is expat, not the local citizens. Almost close to 90% is the expat who has been making a living in UAE. So there is a huge, quite a good local market within because of the population, because of the requirement of vehicles for passenger vehicles as well as commercial vehicles. UAE is an economy mainly which depends on oil and petroleum. The main revenue generation for the government is from oil industries and the petroleum products, which I think constitute about 75% of the revenue of the government. And apart from this oil and petroleum, the main industries which thrive in UAE is tourism and real estate. Apart from tourism, real estate, and oil, as I was telling you before, there's a huge expat population which is there in UAE, to whom there are a lot of requirements, basically FMCG requirements, health requirements, education requirements. So all these industries are also existing in the UAE local market. So basically, as I was telling, even if it's a really small country, because of the population and because of the requirement and because of the trading industries that exist, there is a lot of vehicle population that has been there on the roads of UAE. Roughly, as per statistics, as per I have understood, there are more than 5 million vehicles on UAE roads, which have to be catered with auto spare parts. So with all my these points, what I was trying to mainly demonstrate is that UAE market, the local market itself has got a appetite of local consumption. And the good part, how does Taiwan, China, or Malaysia, Thailand, or Korean companies, like how do they fit into UAE? That's the next point I'm coming to. Actually, UAE as a country doesn't have much of a manufacturing facilities. It does have, it has a lot of manufacturing oil fields. But if you come to other industries, especially auto spare parts, there are very less manufacturing companies actually. There are no manufacturing companies in relation to auto spare parts at all. There are some assembly units, but no manufacturing companies. So basically, UAE have to depend on the outside countries' manufacturing companies like Taiwan, basically to import all their requirements. Whatever local consumption is there, they have to literally import each and everything. So that's how countries like Taiwan has a great opportunity in UAE, within UAE. They can have a steady market always with them once it's explode completely. So as I was telling you, it's completely dependent on the import markets. And how Taiwan fits in more in detail, I can tell you is, for example, now spare parts can be subdivided into OEM parts and aftermarket parts. Now, with regard to OEM parts, in OEM, the main player, the main countries that play is Japan, Korea, German, and US, as mostly the car brands used in UAE are from these countries, and OE is completely procured from these countries. So Taiwan doesn't have a much of a part in the OEM sector. But if you come down to aftermarket, there Taiwan has a huge role actually. Aftermarkets are almost completely sourced from mainly from China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan. So there Taiwan fits in, and that's a market that Taiwan could actually tap from UAE. Now, talking more in detail about the local market, the population of UAE, they are more of a quality concerned population. They are very quality sensitive. A person who owns a car, actually, initial 3 years, it's always fully insurance covered. That's for 95% of the vehicle population actually in UAE, for passenger vehicles population. So almost 3 years is completely covered by full insurance, and the OEM parts are always used. So there is the scope of aftermarket parts or Taiwan parts is very less. But after this 3 years, it's completely usage is on aftermarket quality products. And Taiwan has actually almost created a really good image in this UAE, not just UAE, and the whole of Middle East market as a quality product. All Taiwan products are considered to be really high quality. It is one of the biggest pros for Taiwan, but there are some of the cons also for Taiwan products, which I will be discussing in detail in my further slides. Actually, I'll just run through my slide. Yeah, so some of the cons for Taiwan products is its pricing issues actually. Compared to its competitor countries like China, Malaysia, Thailand, Korea, the products are a bit higher priced. Taiwan products are a bit higher priced. Reason being, I know quality does matter, and quality is much better for the Taiwan products. So obviously pricing will be higher. But issue that we face nowadays in the local market is that product quality from these countries also, like China, Malaysia, Thailand, they're also becoming pretty reasonable nowadays. And what the consumer looks in this market is that the pricing is less with a reasonable quality. And they see that, so slowly, customers are getting drifted towards these countries. So this is one con of Taiwan products, and more there are more issues, and also there are more pros, which going ahead I will discuss. So basically on this slide, what I wanted to present to you is the potential of local market of UAE. As I have shown to you, there's a good population. There are good industries that are thriving in UAE, which requires auto spare parts. Basically, because to make sure the infrastructure works, to make sure logistic work, they need vehicles, they need passenger vehicles, they need commercial vehicles, and auto spare parts are required in this market. So, and the main point is that there are no manufacturing units and very less assembly units in UAE. So obviously, everything has been imported. So Taiwan could play a really good role, and they could really actually tap this market, the local market. So this is about the local market. And as I have started my speech, I had told about the re-export market. So UAE market could be divided into two. One is the local market, and second is the re-export market. Now coming to re-export market, actually UAE is not just some kind of re-export market. It can be called as a re-export hub actually. It's a re-export hub for not just UAE, the GCC region. It's a re-export hub for whole of GCC, Middle East, African regions, as well as some of the CIS and European regions. By CIS and European, I mean the Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, these kind of countries. Even these countries depend on UAE for sourcing their auto spare parts. Now, the main question, and I'll go to my next slide. The main question among everyone and everyone's mind is how UAE could be an export hub. Like, well, why is it necessary to buy from UAE? And these countries, like the Middle East countries or the African countries or CIS countries, they could easily come down to China, Taiwan, or Malaysia, and then they could source it from there. They could directly source it from Taiwan factories. Why should they get it from the distribution houses of UAE? Now, this is where I'm coming. UAE is actually a stocking point. The good part about UAE is that there is a multiple variety of spare parts available. Now, when we talk about auto spare parts, it's a very generic term to talk. Auto spare parts is really simple generic word. But if you go in detail into auto spare parts, there are a lot of mix of spare parts. If most of you must be knowing, like spare parts, a car has almost more than 1,000 spare part items in it. And if you segregate spare parts, there is auto body parts, there are mechanical parts, there are electrical parts, there are AC spare parts, there are more of inner spare parts. So basically, spare parts, there are a lot of items in it. And all factories don't do everything together. Some of the factories specialize in either one part. It could be auto body parts, or it could be the mechanical parts, or it could be the electronic parts. And similarly, in UAE also, all distribution houses don't do all the spare parts together, but they also concentrate on certain areas of spare parts. A good thing about UAE is that there's a huge variety of distribution houses. You can find distribution houses who do body parts. You can find distribution houses who do mechanical parts. You could find for AC parts. You can find all parts that are distribution, really big, huge distribution houses. And it's not just segregation as per parts. There is segregation for OEM also, aftermarket also. Now, people who do OEM, not necessarily they'll be doing aftermarket, and people who do aftermarket, not necessarily they will be doing OEM. You can find both kind of trading houses in UAE. Good part for traders, especially the wholesale distribution traders who are in African regions or the Middle East region, is that they can come down to UAE if they want some OEM parts and some aftermarket parts and some mechanical parts. It's easier for them to procure this mix of goods from one point within UAE. UAE local market is, or the re-export market is not spread out in a big region. It's like a concentrated to certain region. So basically, a trader goes to that particular region. He can source all his requirements in one shot, procure it, make it into a container, and take it back into his country for distribution. Now, in case he has to directly deal with the origin countries like Taiwan or Malaysia or Thailand, what happens is like he has to deal with at least 10 to 15 factories in order to procure these goods. and not necessarily he can procure and assemble it as together in one container as easily as possible from UAE. So this is one big factor how UAE plays the stocking hub in the whole of Middle East and African regions. So, and if you go through other countries also, like GCC, other countries like Saudi, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, and if you go to African countries or you go to other Middle East countries like Egypt, Turkey, and all, those people import goods for their local consumption. No one does it for re-export actually. That's why UAE is considered as a stocking point. And one of the most fascinating statistical data that has come out is that auto spare parts that is getting imported into UAE, almost 40% of it is getting re-exported outside. So that's equivalent ratio of how much is getting consumed locally. That much amount of auto spare parts is getting re-exported out of UAE to Middle East, African regions also. So when you invest in UAE, when a country like Taiwan or any other manufacturing companies invest in UAE, it's not just the local market that you're catering to. You're catering to whole of Middle East, Africa, as well as I'm telling, CIS regions also. So it's like a doorway to all these countries. So there's one point. Apart from this, why traders prefer the UAE market? There are a lot of other points in connection to this. One is the infrastructure. In my next slides, I'll be showing you those points for infrastructure of UAE also. But let me just give you a brief idea. Infrastructure in UAE is so built up that it could cater any amount of trading companies. And other main issue or main factor why traders prefer UAE market is the pricing. Now, as doubts may sprung up, like obviously when you go to a factory directly in Taiwan, you may get a better pricing. But in UAE, the good thing is like the volume, due to this re-export requirement as well as a local requirement, the volume that is procured from these countries are really huge. And therefore, the pricing that we get is also really competitive enough. And this competitive prices could be passed on to these traders who come here. The pricing is a big factor. Infrastructure is available. They could get a lot of mix of items also from this country. Apart from this, another factor is the credit facilities that the traders usually get in the UAE market. To be frank, I'm not a person who promote credit facilities to that extent because I don't believe in building a company on too much liability or debt. But then, yeah, there is a culture in UAE and not just UAE, in the whole of Middle East to provide credit to its traders, and that is not done on a first or one or two transactions. Once the cushion and the trust is created between the supplier and the trader, supplier tend to give them more credit. So basically, even if a trader from this part of the region goes to Taiwan or China or Malaysia, it's not necessary they get the credit that they require. Especially from Taiwan factories, we have seen credit or the credit we get is very less. So basically, from UAE trading distribution houses, these traders get it. So as I was telling, if Taiwan is doing business with UAE when they are stocking the items in UAE, good part is that they could push these items to other Middle East countries or other African countries with these services such as credit, so infrastructure. All the services are provided to the traders. Another one big point for traders to mainly choose UAE is the tax-free tax-free atmosphere that is existing in UAE. It's not a tax-free country. We have a tax that is value-added tax 5%, but it for the end user consumption. For traders or businesses, this tax doesn't affect at all, actually. For traders, actually, the exports could be done. The import, like the basic exports from UAE, could be done at 0% VAT. So basically, there are no other taxes to be paid in UAE at all. So it's a tax-free zone for them. So there are no additional landing costs that is getting incurred for this trader. So these are the main points how UAE has become a main hub in the whole of Middle East as well as the African and CIS region as a auto spare parts stocking house. So when you invest in UAE, especially countries like Taiwan, when their factories get linked up with UAE, it's not just the local market that you cater to. You cater to a more broader kind of regions like Africa, Middle East, and CIS. So these are the two main sales channels that is existing in UAE. That is one is the local market and the other one is the re-export market. I hope this is very much clear with everyone what kind of market you could expect in UAE. Now, in my coming slides, I'll be mainly discussing some of the statistical data and how Taiwan companies are placed in a UAE market, a UAE as well as the GCC market. And now I'll just can just present you some of the graphs. It's pretty much a clear grasp what I have tried to show you. Now, if you see in GCC countries, I would like to initially segregate the GCC countries into OEM and aftermarket. Now, if you check out the OEM parts, as I told before, in OEM, Taiwan companies don't play a very huge part in because it's mainly sourced from Japan, US, Germany, Korea, Thailand, UK, and some of the other countries also. And why this is because GCC countries mainly has a vehicle population, those are Japanese vehicles. It's mainly, in my next slide, I can show you that graph as well. If you check out this graph, in most of the countries, if you check, it's mainly Japanese brands that are dominating the market, like Toyota, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. It's again followed by Korean companies such as Hyundai and Kia. So these are the main brands; those are dominating the GCC market. And once these countries are dominating, the OEM parts that are getting sourced are mainly from these countries like Japan, Korea, Germany, rather than any other country. These are the origin countries of these brands. So OE parts are getting sourced from these countries. So that's the reason why OEM parts is always dominated by Japan, US, Germany, Korea, and all. But if you come down to aftermarket, it is mainly dominated by China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Thailand. Now, if I say, uh, yes, Taiwan has a good share in the aftermarket, but it's not the biggest leader in aftermarket. It's considered to be in a third or fourth position, as far as I have understood. This aftermarket is mainly dominated by China, followed by Thailand, Malaysia, and then Taiwan. And there are a few reasons for this why Taiwan has not come up to the first position. It's not in a really bad position. As I was telling you, it's the fourth position. It has fairly good amount of market share, but it could increase its market share further. And how they could do it, that's what I'm gonna continue with in my slides now. Mainly, the pros of Taiwan goods, which I have explained as before. Quality. Quality is really high, and as per the local community, the local population, the taste for quality goods is really high. The local community does need a quality products. But if it comes to re-export market, it's a bit different. Re-export market is mainly to African regions, Middle East regions, where the traders require cheap products. It's cheaper products are given more value than the quality. So on a balancing scale, I would say price has a much bigger factor than quality actually for re-export markets. And here is where China or Thailand or Malaysian parts come into play. Actually, their products is much more pricing wise is much more cheaper than Taiwan. So obviously the re-export market, they always prefer Chinese or Thailand, Malaysian products over Taiwan due to the pricing issue. And the point I had told before also is that the quality of these countries are also reasonably increasing nowadays within the same pricing. So that's where Taiwan is mainly, having that competition with these countries, pricing. Apart from pricing, the second point which I would like to point out is the credit facilities. Now, most of these manufacturing countries or the manufacturing units from China, Korea, or Thailand, or Malaysia are coming up with more innovative way, and one of them is providing credit to the distribution houses in UAE as well as in other GCC countries. They prefer giving a lot of credit facilities, not a very high credit facilities, majorly small kind of credit facilities, which I think is very less in Taiwan actually. So again, traders, as I was telling you, UAE and Middle East country has this credit term atmosphere. They give the other distributors credit facilities. So in turn, they expect their suppliers to give them kind of credit facilities also. And when they're getting in from manufacturing companies like China or Thailand or Malaysia, they prefer to source from them rather than from a company that doesn't give them a credit facility. So that's where also, China, Thailand, Malaysia has a competitive edge over Taiwan products. And other factors also contribute to this China or Malaysia or Thailand getting much higher market share, such as the connection of UAE government with these countries actually, especially pre-COVID, the relation between UAE and China has been really increasing. Imports from China also, it's not just in auto spare parts. There's a good footprint of China, which is really spreading all over UAE, all just not in auto spare parts. It's coming up in real estate, also it's coming in construction field, it's coming in. So it's covering most of the regions nowadays. So this kind of strong relationship with governments are also helping those manufacturing companies to establish in UAE and spread in UAE. which also I think Taiwan auto spare parts industry should focus more on to build relation with the Middle East countries so that they can have a better footprint. So this is how Taiwan is placed in the GCC market. As I was telling, these are the pros and these are the cons of Taiwan companies or Taiwan factories, Taiwan products. If worked out properly, I think Taiwan could have a much better marketplace. Because our company, like my company name is Landmark International, and we have been focusing on Taiwan products for last 12 to 15 years now. And we have been always trying, to push Taiwan products, and we have always seen the product has got a very good scope in this market. Product has got really good quality. The auto spare parts from Taiwan has already been established as a quality product. If properly marketed and with the right tools and some facilities, they could have a better market share. In fact, become a really market leader in the whole of UAE as well as in the GCC as well as Middle East region. Going to my next slide. This is my next slide, wherein I'll be giving a briefing on what has happened during this COVID times. Now, COVID is something which struck the whole of country from January. Some countries got affected from January, some countries got affected from February. In UAE, the main effect had started towards March, mid of March. It had started towards mid of March and it had gone until April, May, and from June onwards, we had gone to a recovery stage. So I will give you first impact on how it has happened, like in the month of March, April, May, when there was a really huge slump in the market. Basically, most of the countries went into lockdown. UAE also went into lockdown, not just UAE. The whole of GCC region had gone into a lockdown. In UAE, the lockdown was mainly for the month of April, with the main emirate in UAE, that is Dubai, getting locked down in May, and Abu Dhabi still under a lockdown from June onwards. UAE actually has fared well in 2019. That's my point. You can see there was almost a 2.9% economic growth in UAE in 2019, and it was expected a further much bigger growth in 2020 for UAE, especially with the Auto Expo 2020 that is coming up that was supposed to come in 2020. But right now with COVID becoming a villain between, this has had a really bad impact. It had a bad impact all over the world, and similar kind of impact had affected UAE also. From March mid onwards, the COVID impact had started. April, we had seen a really bad lockdown, which had brought down the whole of economy down, the economic growth down, and it affected businesses really bad. Now, coming to auto spare parts industry, there was a downfall of almost 80%, I believe, whole of auto spare parts in the month of April and May. So there was a really big fall in the market. Now, to talk about, again, I will talk about the local market as well as the re-export market, how COVID has impacted the local market and also how COVID has impacted the re-export market. Now, local market, mainly the impact was due to the revenue generation getting affected of the government, actually. For example, I would like to say the oil prices falling down. UAE is one country that depends on oil a lot, especially Abu Dhabi is a really oil generating emirate of UAE, oil generating from where a huge revenue is generated. But oil prices had got a really bad slump after this COVID, so the revenue from oil has been really affected. Other two main sectors for UAE was real estate and tourism. Real estate before pre-COVID itself, real estate was on a smaller downward trend. So with COVID, it has become worse. And tourism has as tourism I have been explaining, there was more of travel restrictions in the country, due to which the tourism industry also has taken a very downward trend. So basically, all the revenue generating factors in UAE has been affected badly, as oil prices took a very bad slump. Real estate, tourism also had gone down. And moreover, also due to these three industries getting affected very badly, as I was telling before, the expat population also started getting affected. A lot of expats have to leave the country due to job loss and everything. And due to this, the industries which cater to this expat population also started getting affected, like FMCG companies, retail companies. All these industries started getting affected. So basically, the economy took a very downward trend after a really bad slump during this March and April month. And a lot of other factors also have contributed to the trading in this COVID scenario. It's because of the prices getting increased from, especially from Taiwan countries. What we have seen is that there is an increase in the price of products. Mainly, I believe it's due to the fall in the volume products production. Maybe due to the decrease in volume production, the pricing would have increased. So obviously, Middle East is more of a market wherein once the prices are fixed, it's very difficult to increase the prices. So basically, most of the traders now who are importing items from Taiwan or China or Malaysia, they have to literally absorb this increase in cost and sell it to their traders. And it's not just the pricing of products. The landing costs have also increased, maybe due to the shortages, scarcity of transports and everything. The overall landing costs have also increased, which again the traders have to absorb into the ASL. They're not able to pass it on to their traders. So this is what has happened in the month of April and May. The economy has taken a really bad fall, and auto spare parts especially has taken a really bad fall. As I was telling you, almost 70 to 80% the auto spare part industry had fallen down. And going ahead now, I would like to present you what is the recovery path after post-COVID. It's not completely post-COVID actually. COVID is not completely over yet, but post-COVID after the lockdown. After the lockdown in month of April, in May, we had seen the economy of especially UAE markets opening up in May and June and July. Not just the UAE market, we could see the neighboring countries also opening up, and we can see also the other Middle East countries, African regions, and other CS regions also opening up, and trade again becoming on a full fledged scale. So I will take you my, development by development, what has been happening post-COVID situation. Now, the most biggest debates that happen is how is the economy recovering from this COVID? The biggest crucial after the crucial months of April and May. Whether it's more of like a V-shaped kind of recovery, wherein the downfall of the economy is really steep, and within 1 or 2 months it takes back in the full force towards the same level of performance, or is it a U-shaped recovery? It's a graph based. I'm seeing the shapes. U-shaped kind of recovery, wherein there's a steep fall during the lockdown, and after 3, 4, 5 months, there is a good steady growth, which is at the same level, which reaches back to the same level as before. Or there's a W-shaped kind of recovery, which there's a steep fall, there's a minor recovery, there's a fall again, and then there is a recovery. Or it could be a L-shaped recovery for the economy, wherein there's a steep fall and the economy recovers only after 1 or 2 or 3 years, and it takes a really, really, really long. Or it could be a tick-shaped kind of recovery, wherein there's a steep fall and the recovery is very, very, very slow, but on a steady pace. So, what kind of recovery is expected in UAE? Now, from my knowledge and my company's experience, what we are seeing in auto spare parts is definitely not a V-shaped recovery, because after lockdown, it's been almost 3 months and 2.5 or close to 3 months, but the recovery is not on a sudden swoop. It is going on a very slow pace, so it's definitely not a V-shaped or an L-shaped. The condition is not that bad that it's gonna recovery is gonna be taking like around 2 or 3 years time to recover back. I'm specifically talking about spare parts. I'm not talking about the whole of UAE economy. I'm talking specifically about the spare parts industry. And as I was telling, it's not definitely a V-shaped or an L-shaped, as far as or a W-shaped also. As for our analysis, it could be mostly a U-shaped or tick mark. According to me, it's more of a tick mark shaped kind of recovery, because what has happened in last 2 months, especially mid of May onwards, June, and until today, what we have seen is that there is a steady growth. Whatever growth is happening in the previous month, it's not going down after that. That particular growth is kept, and along with that, at least an additional 5% or 10% growth is happening. So there's a slow but steady growth that is happening in UAE. So basically, it is a really plus point for a country like UAE that it has got a steady growth after the big slump that has happened in April. Now, how? What is contributing to this growth? Economy, once it has to, after such a big fall down, it has to grow. There has to be some factors to this. Now, the main factors, what has contributed to this is the policies that this UAE government has been taking. UAE government has actually taken a really bold step, actually opening up the whole of UAE market. They did it with a lot of carefulness and putting a lot of restrictions and guidelines to be followed by the citizens. The good part is that they opened up the markets from May onwards, They opened up the markets from May onwards with a real good control over the corona or the COVID situation. They've been able to control it. At the same time, it has been able to open up the business trading activities in UAE. And the good part about this is that the smaller retail companies and the wholesalers or distributors, it has given them confidence, to come out in the open and do business. They know they are in much more of a safer hand and they could do business. So yes, business is opening up, has already opened up completely in UAE with a lot of restrictions in order to make sure there is control over the COVID. And the other good factors which has helped out is that the flights are reopening all over UAE, Middle East, as well as African and the MENA region now. This has helped to slowly bring back. From July onwards, the flights have restarted most of the destinations. This has helped UAE in two ways. One is as I was telling, this is the trading hub in the whole of Middle East. Traders have started now coming back to UAE and procure their goods. This has helped UAE a lot, not just UAE a lot. It's necessary that the UAE market opens up well ahead of the other Middle East countries or the other countries because this is a trading hub. Only once UAE opens up, it's easier for the other trading countries to come and procure it from UAE. So it's very necessary that UAE lead the way. So yes, UAE has done a really good job here. They have really opened up the market completely by May and keeping COVID under control. Now, another good part about UAE is that the recovery of UAE, the recovery of business world as we see, is much fast paced in UAE than compared to the whole of Middle East and compared to the other regions also. The recovery is, I will not say it's slow, it is slow, but compared to other countries, it is pretty fast actually. So we are really happy with whatever is happening currently in the auto spare parts industry. There's a steady growth, there's a steady, slow growth for UAE, and hopefully next maybe may take another 6 to 8 months for complete, no, 8 months, maybe 6 months time for the complete recovery until of this auto spare parts industry. But this growth is steady. It is made of like the base is really strong for this growth. So we don't expect it to crumble down any further. And we are really happy that UAE government is doing a lot and in its power to make sure this goes on into the future. Now, other there are also good things about UAE government. What they have done is that they have given a lot of stimulus packages to the smaller companies as well as the bigger distribution house. They have given a lot of financial stimulus packages wherein when there was a complete lockdown, as I was telling, the whole of economy had fallen down, and companies, the smaller companies especially, they have got affected. The good part about UAE government is that they came forward with a lot of stimulus packages for the smaller companies to support them, make sure that they stay afloat. So this is what government is supportingly doing for us. This helps the other manufacturing countries like Taiwan, China, Malaysia, Thailand, and all manufacturing countries because we are building back our trading platform. The government is building back the trading platform so that trade could happen not just in UAE, it could be catered to, as I told before, catered to Middle East, African, and CIS and the Europe regions as well. So this is about COVID situation, what is happening in UAE, what has happened pre-COVID, what during COVID, and post-COVID. And I have been telling about all the business scenarios and what are the opportunities for Taiwan companies, the pros of Taiwan companies, what are the major market sharing, what are the country shares in UAE and also throughout GCC. Now, as I'm heading towards the end of my presentation, I would like to give you a briefing on the new kind of regulations and compliances that are coming up in UAE as well as in GCC. Why I brought this point into my slide or my presentation is because currently UAE, not just UAE, the whole of GCC, they are working towards becoming more and more compliant with international regulations and international laws. This is a really huge factor for other countries to basically make trade links with UAE. Now, for example, I'll just say past 2 years, what are the new regulations or compliances progresses that it's made in UAE? 2 years back, VAT has nothing to do with the outside world, but I'm just giving you a brief on VAT and what are its impact on the business that's happened in UAE. VAT is actually value-added tax, and it was implemented in 2018 in UAE and Saudi Arabia, and it was to be implemented throughout all the GCC countries. The VAT, that is value-added tax. It is 2018. It was implemented in UAE, Saudi Arabia, and 2019 it was implemented in Bahrain and 3 more countries, that is Qatar, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman is yet to implement. Now with this COVID effect, we are not sure when that will be happening, but yes. What are the effects that was created due to this VAT? The VAT was fixed rate, that was 5% throughout the industry in UAE as well as in Saudi. Initially, in the start of that, it was considered as kind of a black mark, or you can say, pulling the trade back. It was considered as not as such a huge in favor of VAT. No one was in favor of VAT to that extent, but that was more of a misconception, which was later on changed. VAT is actually affecting only the end users in the country. Actually, businesses have no effect due to this VAT. Also, the traders who come outside of from outside UAE to source their product, they also don't have any kind of effect due to this VAT. This VAT is actually helping the government to raise additional revenue within the economy to ensure better infrastructure, better growth, and better prosperity for the expat population as well as the citizens of UAE. This VAT of 5% doesn't create too much inflation in the expenses of the normal population, like a normal person like me. It doesn't increase on a normal labor also. It doesn't increase the inflation too much. The 5% VAT is really minimal, but it's a really huge revenue that the government could make in order to increase the infrastructure of the whole of UAE. So this has been a really helpful factor actually to build trade further. And the good part is that, as I was telling you, it doesn't export in no way is affected by VAT. Export is VAT free completely in UAE. So that's why UAE has always been a tax-free haven for the traders who come here and do this. And secondly, the new compliance that is happening is called ESMA. ESMA, the full form of ESMA is Emirates Authority for Standardization and Metrology. Now, ESMA is actually it's a certification. It's a certification of products based on certain standards that are set out by the GSO. That's the Gulf Standardization Organization. They have set out certain standards for each products in the market. It has to meet those standards. Only then ESMA certification could be obtained by this product. Now, ESMA has been in place in last couple of years, and it has been mainly implemented into pharmaceutical industries and foodstuff industries initially, and now ESMA is slowly coming into spare parts. So in 2019 onwards, spare parts, not all spare parts, certain categories of spare parts like mirrors, radiators, condensers, seat belts, engine belts, and some certain other kind of other auto spare parts were also included in the ESMA. From 2019 onwards, it's necessary that these products get the ESMA certification. How do we get the ESMA certification? Is that the products that we import, be it from Taiwan or any other countries, these products has to be basically lab tested and made sure that they meet the standards that are set out by the GSO labs. Once they set out the meet the standards, the ESMA certification is given, and only once the ESMA certification is gained, products could be imported as well as distributed in UAE. Now, as of now, ESMA is not very mandatorily implemented, but it's getting mandatory, and coming years it's expected to go very strict. So this is actually a good point for Taiwan products. As I was telling you, Taiwan products are really high quality products within this market, and most of the Taiwan products are meeting ISO and EMARC regulations. So once they meet these kind of regulations, ESMA certification could also be obtained very easily, which helps the Taiwan products to be distributed in a way much easier than Chinese or its counterpart products. And going ahead, another regulation that has been popping up nowadays is called ESR. ESR has actually not much to do with Taiwan companies. I'm just including it because that's the newest regulation that is being implemented in UAE. In 2020, it's getting implemented now. ESR is more of the full form of ESR is Economic Substance Regulation. It's an international regulation actually, and it is being implemented by an international body called OECD. UAE is currently coming in line with ESR because UAE is considered, as I was told in my previous slides, UAE is considered to be a tax-free haven. And the whole job of ESR is to make sure that international companies who have their sister concerns or who have their branches in various countries, they don't try to evade tax by routing their goods through this tax-free countries. So ESR, the whole purpose is to eradicate tax evasions, and UAE currently, as it's a very low tax country, UAE is also implementing ESR in UAE so that this international compliance could be made sure it's happening in UAE as well. ESR, I think, is going to be implemented in the rest of GCC also soon. But then, yeah, UAE has taken a first step and they are coming in compliance with ESR, and it is already in implementation. So I have been telling about all these points like ESMA, ESR, new tax regulations. All this has actually brought UAE to an international level wherein it could have more trade links with other countries. This trading opportunity is increasing and becoming more and more compliant with the international laws. That's how UAE is actually working nowadays. And it's not just UAE actually, all of GCC is also becoming more and more compliant with international laws actually. Even Saudi has implemented a recent certification called Sapper. It is very strict. It's making sure the standard of the goods that are being distributed in Saudi is really huge, really good. So this kind of implementations are also happening in throughout GCC. So this is what is happening in all of UAE. Now I'm almost ending my presentation. As I'm ending my presentation, I would like to give you a small idea on the good new opportunities that is expected in UAE in coming 2021. Now, Expo 2020, this was one of the biggest projects of UAE. UAE has been working towards this for the past 3-4 years now. They have been building the Expo, and it was expected to happen in October 2020. Now, what is Expo 2020? It's a huge platform where different manufacturing companies and different countries come together, share their business ideas and build a new business ideas and invest in those business ideas. It was a huge platform. It has happened every 4 or 3 years. It happens in different countries, and this year it was to be happen. It has had to happen in Dubai. And the total number of countries that participate in this expo was expected to be around 190 countries with million of visitors. Out of these visitors, almost 70% visitors were expected to come outside UAE. So this was a huge platform that was expected to happen for 2020, and in my slides before I told 2020 was expected to be a really huge growth for Dubai and a huge economical growth, especially due to the presence of Expo also. But right now, due to this Corona, the COVID situation, the Expo had to be postponed from UAE. It has been not from UAE, it has been postponed to next year to 2021. It will be done in Dubai itself next year in 2021. So what we are seeing in future is that there will be a huge opportunity that will be coming for this manufacturing countries like Taiwan or China within UAE. UAE government is still working towards creating more opportunities, more platform for businesses to be set up here, and more countries to distribute their products here. So Expo 2020 is expected next year by 2021, and this is expected to give a huge economical boost for Dubai as well. So as I'm ending my presentation here now. So I have touched mostly fairly all the points about the sales channels in UAE, the sales possibilities in UAE, the sales possibilities in GCC regions, the Middle East regions, how COVID impact has affected our market, how post-COVID recovery is happening, and what are the new regulations, compliances within UAE, and also the new possibilities within UAE market. I hope this has been a really effectful and fruitful presentation to everyone. I am really happy I was given this opportunity by Taitra to give this presentation here. And I really thank everyone for listening to my presentation and seeing this. And going ahead, I don't know if there's a Q&A section. If there's a Q&A section, I'll be really happy to clear your doubts to my extent of my knowledge, actually. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ramadas. 那听完刚刚3位精彩的分享呢，接下来就进入我们的 Q&A 时间。那由于我们收到的提问非常的多，那再加上这个时间有限，所以我们就从中呢挑出3个问题来请教我们线上的专家。All right, so let's go to the first question. How to use e-commerce to increase sales in the region? May I have Mr. Ramadas to answer this question? I believe the audience is highly interested in this topic applied in your region. Mr. Ramadas, please.
And lately, during my meetings with some of the e-commerce platforms, the number of e-commerce companies that has come up in last 2 years, according to me, is at least 15 to 20 companies has been. E-commerce platforms exclusively for spare parts. Just on spare parts. It's not for the all commodities, it's just for spare parts, just focusing on spare parts itself. At least 15 to 20 small companies has sprung up in the last 1 year at least, that's for sure, because we get a lot of calls nowadays on to basically enroll our products onto this e-commerce platform, to enroll our products in there, give them our product list, so that basically they can sell it on, like how Amazon does or how other big e-commerce companies does. And it's not just the small companies, e-commerce platforms that has come up actually in recent years. We have been also approached by Amazon as well as another companies like Noon. Noon is another big e-commerce platform in UAE, just like Amazon. It's a local e-commerce platform. It's really huge. It does all kind of commodities. So we have been approached by such kind of big giants also like Amazon, Noon, to enroll our products in their websites. So, and they have even got dedicated teams for spare parts. They have got dedicated teams within their companies for spare parts enrolling. So what we can see is that, yes, there is basically auto spare parts is getting using e-commerce platforms much more than how it used to be. And it's not just auto spare parts companies are building a platform. It's like basically big companies like Amazon, Noon, already who have a platform have started enrolling auto spare parts into their websites. So yes, as I was telling, there is a huge growth, and the increase is mainly happening in last 2 years, especially in last 2 years. But it's more of, for example, my company, we don't do an e-commerce platform actually, but we are interested to enroll our products into a platform wherein a multiple kind of products are available. So this kind of platforms are being built, and especially we have also seen not just platforms for usage in UAE. We have seen that recently there are platforms from other countries for sourcing to other countries. For example, we have client-based e-commerce platforms from Russia. Basically, we get customers from Russia through this platform. So basically, e-commerce is becoming a huge thing, and UAE, especially last 1 year, it is developing a lot, and we expect it to go further. And other thing, as I was telling in the start of this thing, is that the spare parts industry is a bit backwards towards technology right now, but things are changing a lot nowadays. A much more professional attitude is being taken to run the business in spare parts industry, due to which I think this merger with the e-commerce platform will be much more easier for coming years. So yes, there is a huge scope for e-commerce, and yeah, we expect it to go further. And I think in the next 1 year, it will be a huge growth. E-commerce will be a huge hit in spare parts industry, especially in UAE. Yes,
all right. Thank you, Mr. Ramadas, for your in-depth analysis. Let's go to the second question. Will the trade war between the U.S. and China discouraging people from buying China's supply chain and then shift to other region? May I have Mr. Swiecki to answer this question? Mr. Swiecki, please.
I believe the biggest factor in determining which way it will go would be who's going to become the next president of the United States. And I would expect to see a relaxation, at least temporarily, if Joseph Biden should win, and the inclusion of other countries and maybe a more multilateral approach. I believe that there's also the possibility, for example, we've seen when we have reduced imports from China, many of those goods now simply come in from Mexico. And in many cases, they're coming from Mexico with a lot of Chinese inputs into that Mexican-sourced component. So I would expect that if there is a tightening of the supply coming in from China, there will still be a lot of Chinese content coming into the United States. It'll be, one, filtered through other countries. Two, it'll be at the lower tier level, so it's a subcomponent of the component coming in from another country, such as Mexico.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swiecki. Indeed, in U.S. and China trade war, new supply chain do rattle the market, right? Okay, the last but not least, The last question we have right now is how to increase auto parts business with Taiwan suppliers. May I have Mr. Cybulski to answer this question? Mr. Cybulski, please.
I think that to increase auto parts business with Taiwanese suppliers, generally it's hard to do this business today times because it's plenty of competitors on the market from a different region of the world. In my opinion, it's also a little connected what I said at the end of this presentation, that sales activity. So I'm always saying that active supplier can win a lot. So somebody who is pushing us for some activities can get more than somebody who just based on the just offer, because it's we are always open for conversation, and from time to time we also need a little more about production, maybe about offer, some more details, because in many cases it's we can have this kind of situation. And I can say that it's not only from Taiwan, because it's also plenty of this kind of offer we get from China. We just get general info, portfolio of the company, and then we are having, for example, only some Excel file with the list of product and prices, and nothing more. And it's in my opinion, it's impossible to do it this way, because we need to explanation. We need something more of the culture of factory, quality of factory, how you do something. Because not all the times price is the most important, for sure. So there are some advantages, and if we get only some kind of email with the list of product, can be not enough. So my advice is to support more for the factory's owner, to support more sales side, to go for the exhibition, to look for the customer, to have more meetings. Still, I have a couple of companies from Thai who never visit Poland, for example. So how they can understand how we work? It's in my opinion crucial, just to see how look other side. For example, that's why I'm usually visiting Taiwan, and I visit all of the suppliers in their factories. I can say that I have some technical knowledge, but I'm not a technical guru, let's say. But still, I want to see how looks this factory, how look the process. I can learn something from that. I can see how they work, and it helps us in cooperation. And I think that this is the best answer which I can give you for this moment. But of course, I'm open for contacts, and if you have some more detail, if you need some more detailed answer, I'm open.
Thank you, Mr. Cybulski. The webinar is going to be ended. 那我们再次感谢各位今天参加今天的线上研讨会。那活动呢就即将结束，也希望呢大家都能够获得满满的收获。从8月到9月，每周四下午3点，我们外贸协会呢都有一系列的市场学相关的线上研讨会，欢迎各位能够呼朋引伴一起上线收听。而下周四呢，我们也即将为各位带来以色列如何以科技面对全球的挑战。对新创有兴趣的朋友们，不妨能够锁定我们的频道，内容非常精彩，不容错过。那最后呢，当然也别忘记了要帮我们按个赞，还有呢，要开启我们冒协的 YouTube 小频道，让冒协的影片不漏接哦。那再次感谢大家的参与，下次见，拜拜。